When we talk about World War II today, we often focus on the flashy elements of it, the hero stories like Saving Private Ryan. And that is true, those did happen. But much more frequent were the stories of everyday people like you or I who were forced to fight or suffer within this war that they really had nothing to do with. And for civilians, that meant the pain of rationing and probably not having enough rations to even feed your family at any given time, or the struggle of rolling blackouts or having to hide in a bunker at the drop of a hat. For the military, it meant this sort of constant mental strain of trying to stay one step ahead of your enemy. And there were all kinds of tricks that they would deploy to do that, all of which were probably exhausting and painful for these soldiers who really, again, didn't really sign up to be fighting in this war.
Like here, look at this. These are inflatable Sherman tanks by the US Army. Now, normally these tanks weigh about 40 tons. And these trucks, and the tanks as well, were used to deceive and intimidate enemy lines.
So those tanks were part of a psychological operation by the US military called the Ghost Army. And the Ghost Army was actually about 1,100 soldiers. But they weren't soldiers. They were actually artists and engineers and creatives who were employed to basically come up with intimidation and deception tactics. Now, this practice of intimidation and deception isn't anything new. It's been around for really as long as warfare has been around. Think about the Terracotta Army or the Trojan Horse in Troy. This was just the US military's iteration of this in World War II. Some of my favorites are they would create these sonic soundscapes that were basically like the sound of trucks or tanks driving by to make it sound like there was an army nearby to where the Germans were. Or my favorite, and what we're painting today, they would go to bars and pubs in recently liberated areas, like say in France, and they would sing songs of military divisions that were previously there because they knew that the Germans would have left spies behind, and they wanted to make it seem like the Americans had more of a presence in these places than they really did. I come back to that point about the exhausting psychological burden and the mental toll that these psyops took on people who participated in them. And there's one story that I think stands out more than any other to point out really how tense it all was. At the height of the Battle of the Bulge, there were Germans that were dressing up as Americans, kind of running their own psychological operations. And a unit from the Ghost Army, run by Jack McGlynn, they impersonated the 90th Infantry Division. So they got in a truck and they were driving through an American checkpoint, and they got stopped by the military police from the real 90th Infantry Division. And this military police officer says, "What's the password?" And this guy says, "I don't have the password." And they say, "Well, where are you from?" And he says, "I'm from Boston." He says, "Well, Boston's a big city, so where are you really from?" This guy says, "I'm from Medford," which is a town just outside of Boston. And this military police officer, he goes, "Okay, you think you're from Medford. What is the name of the school on Harvard Street?" And this guy names the school. So it turns out that of all of the soldiers that he could have run into, he runs into someone who actually grew up just a quarter of a mile away from him. But the tension was palpable, and these moments happened all the time. But if you put yourself in that situation, think about the intensity. I mean, these guys were seconds away from killing each other. This could have been the last conversation they ever had. And again, the soldiers who were part of the Ghost Army, they weren't soldiers. They were creatives and engineers who were put in this horrific, intense, exhausting situation. Imagine having to go back to your life right after that. So what became of the Ghost Army? Well, shortly after the war ended and Germany surrendered, the Ghost Army was officially disbanded. But while the other soldiers from the US Army went on to receive recognition and medals of achievement, the Ghost Army's existence was kept classified until 1996. So I use their story to illustrate the burden of warfare, because I think more so than any other division, the people who participated in the Ghost Army probably had to live with so much mental burden. At the end of the day, they weren't recognized for any of their achievements. Many of them lived their whole life without ever being able to tell people what they had done during the war, and dying before the existence of the Ghost Army was even declassified. And yet, a few of them went on to have really successful careers, Art Kane became a successful artist. He was friends with Andy Warhol, and even today he has art hanging in the Modern Museum of Art in New York. Bill Blass became a very successful fashion designer. And I should mention that since the declassification of this information, there is one professor who has really taken lead on trying to get their story out there, and it's the source for most of my research today. And his name is Rick Beyer, and I'll put the link to his website in the description. It's called ghostarmy.com, and it's got all kinds of stories. He also has his own presentation on there, and he's done a great job of organizing this history. Now let's take a look at this painting. So here it is, and I'm pretty happy with it. I'm looking at it now, and I should say that this isn't exactly an original composition. The original is actually by one of my first watercolor tutors, Javid Tabitabai, and I'll link his YouTube series right here. But I'm pretty happy with it. I've tried to create this ominous sort of feeling, so a lot of dark and long shadows. You can see the American sitting at a table, and there's a couple pairs of other civilians standing by. And the idea is that, you know, they're kind of watching them, and you can feel that there's some sort of tension there.
So I hope you enjoyed this episode, and if you did, please do click that subscribe and like button. It just helps the channel out so much. And I'll see you next time on Painting the Past.
Dude, I honestly just ruined this painting.